Hey everybody, this is Ned Talks. Got Redion here again, and we're going to talk about starting when you're busy. Because if you don't start when you're busy, then when you actually become busy, you're probably going to give up on whatever you're doing because it's going to take up too much of your schedule. You're going to get overwhelmed. And it came up. Radion and I were talking about getting started, and there are so many different problems with getting started, where to start, and all that other stuff. But most importantly, most people, when they go to do something, just generally don't start at all. They'll do this or that. For example, when I started this YouTube channel, I bought this microphone, but then I was like, I don't know if the lighting is good enough. What about my background? I got to get my weird little squid thing. Um, But so Radion, what was the hardest part when you first got started? Did you need a little motivational kick, or did it just kind of naturally you're like, oh, I've decided to do this thing and I'm gonna start?
So this has been somewhat of a progression for me. I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I want to have everything in line before I start something. So very recently, I've intentionally and like over time, I've just pushed myself to just start. Basically, this is what I'm doing with the YouTube channel and other aspects of my life. But when it comes to real estate investing, it was the same idea. So I know I want to do real estate, but how do you start if you don't have money, if you don't know anything about what you're doing? And I've been following channels for years and years before I ever got started with real estate.
Was that your first thing, or was it like did you read a book, or what was the first like what's the first thing you remember like strongly?
That got me excited about real estate.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say coming to the United States, I was 12 years old, moved in Brooklyn, and I was living in the city in New York. And I was seeing all these huge buildings all around me, right? And made some friends. And then over time, I used to think, wait, somebody owns that, and all these people rent it, and then that guy is getting all that money. And I used to think, wow, that's such a large amount of money. So that's when it started. But obviously, it's not that easy. Just buy a building and get all the cash, right? So I've always been a computer guy. So I've always like when I was 12 years old, 13, when I came here, I got a computer and I was searching, how to be a millionaire, how to do this, how to make money. And real estate was always there. So of course I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and a bunch of bigger pockets podcasts, but I never really did anything and never really got started. That was partly because of the way my income was
Yeah.
set up. I was I never had a steady income, and I never had saved more than like $10,000, so I couldn't start. But I was getting educated, and that was
This is
a
back
way.
when you owned your rug company, your cleaning
Yeah,
company.
this is when I had the cleaning business. But even before that, I had a bunch of like odd jobs. I was doing security. I did real estate, which I never made money off. Like I was an agent. I had the rug business. Yep. So I was doing these things, but it never really got started. So I was somewhat in that analysis paralysis phase. And when I discovered Zuber, one rental at a time, he actually. So I give a lot of credit to him because he made it very clear for me that what you got to do is you got to focus, you got to learn your market, and real estate is a skill. So
Yeah.
even though I had no money and didn't know, I was living in New York City with no savings, so I don't know where I'm going to invest there. I started anyway. I started analyzing my neighborhood right where I lived. I was living in Woodhaven, Queens. I don't know if somebody knows where that is, but that's Queens, part of New York City, one of the boroughs. So I started analyzing that, and then meanwhile started save some money. But I started doing all these things before I even was ready to make any purchases or any investments.
Yeah.
Slowly, I learned that skill, that analyzing that market. I realized that it wasn't going to work there, so I moved into another market, I moved. I didn't physically move. I mean, I moved my looking. Where I was looking. So then that was in Long Island. It's also a part of New York. It's a different area of New York. Started looking there. The numbers were a little bit better there. I still
But
had no,
I'm curious, how bad were the numbers in New York?
and it was all negative. It was all negative. There was zero positive cash flow there.
You just lose $1,000 a month or something crazy
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
it was all negative. So like when you develop your average market average, it was negative. And this was not even like in like Manhattan. It was in Queens and like areas that it could potentially work in. But if something that came up that had even like a 2%, like a 4% return, then it just got swept up right away.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is that there's people that invest in New York. There's a lot of investors there, but I don't know how they make it work. Maybe they've been doing this for a while, and it was
As
just wasn't for
yeah.
me.
As far as I can tell, like I saw a video, just you're making me think of it, yesterday, where Thatch, he's been on Zuber channel. He's a real estate investor out of Washington, in Seattle, and he does these big buildings you're talking, or at least big from our perspective.
Yeah.
And he's talking about he built a building and it cost him 3.4 to build it, and it took him 3 years to do it. And it sounded like he got similar numbers to what you and I get when we buy stuff that isn't in a good, not that it's not in a good area, but not in the heart of the city.
Yep.
So it sounds like you have to just build the building to get cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to
So,
start from scratch, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So getting back to what I was saying, I did a look, change my market. Basically, I was looking there. The numbers were a little bit better there. I still didn't have enough money to invest. But I went to showings with an agent. I was analyzing deals daily. So this is the crux of what we're talking about here, right? You have to start when you're busy, when you're doing other things.
Yeah. So it sounds like you started underwriting and looking at numbers and fiddling with spreadsheets, and even though you had no idea what you were doing, and you just
Yep.
messed with it over and over again until suddenly things started making sense.
Yes, and then I switched markets again. So I decided to completely leave New York and decided to move. But I was going to move once I found a house hack, a duplex, an investment property. So by the time where I started to look in this market where I am now, I've already had the skill of
Yeah.
pinpointing a good deal. So when this property that I am in now,
Yeah.
when this came in the market, I just jumped on it right away, and boom, I was ready.
Well, it's interesting because I worked with a lot of different people locally, and they run into the same problem because they're like, "Hey, I own a house in this neighborhood. I love this neighborhood because it's safe. I really want to buy a rental property in this neighborhood." And in New Orleans, you've got certain areas of Metairie that are very, very nice.
Mhm.
And just like everywhere else, where things are very, very nice, they do not cash flow. That's just not how.
Cash flow is not very nice.
No, or very, very negative. And it's like, well, I don't know how I feel about that neighborhood. And it's interesting. It's interesting how similar it is, but at the same time, you bring up a great point that learning how to underwrite, and then the fact that I have people that I work with that have found out that they can't get cash flow, and they've been looking for 6 months in the place they can't get cash flow. And over the last couple of weeks, they're like, "Hey, so I looked a couple miles away and there's cash flow." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I've been saying."
That's how it's done. Yeah.
But I don't think that they would have learned the skill had they not done that initial painful process of just, "Hey, I figured out all the numbers." And the first time you do it, it takes you like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, and you're sitting there and you're like, "But the numbers are all negative. What did I do wrong?" And you didn't do anything wrong. It's
Yeah.
just the wrong
Yeah.
spot. So what about so obviously finding a building is, you go through all, when we can talk about the math and all that stuff in a different video, but what was it like now that you found your first building? How'd you figure out financing? Was because that's equally as intimidating of a box that has a mysterious thing in it where you're scared to open it and find out what's going on.
Yeah,
So how was
yeah,
that?
like I said, I was looking even before I had any of the down payment saved up, you know. So as soon as I had that 3.5% for the FHA, you know, I went straight to looking at deals, you know. And then as in this market where I am now, it took me, I'll say, a year and a half before I got this investment property. So for that whole year and a half, I just kept saving and increasing my, you know, my down payment potential. And yeah, and then it just happened. You know, I had and then I also, which is a little bit lucky for me, I got married and pooled money from my wife with mine. So you know that increased our down payment as well, and that's how it happened. But I was
There,
still doing all of the work before I had any of the money. You know, that's
yeah.
what that's the main point here. You know, so you gotta start before you even know anything.
And I think that's the hardest part to communicate. I don't know if you're helping out any less experienced investors, but are do you feel like that's the hardest part to get across? Because when I talk to people, they're like, "Well, I don't have any money yet, so I'm not going to look at anything." And I'm like,
So
that's not the great."
so there is one investor that I'm working with. He's actually my cousin. He wants to invest in my area. And his problem is not the financing because he has a whole bunch of money in the bank, and
That's
he's
equally as bad.
it is bad because he's so impatient. He just wants to put that money somewhere, you know, like he can't wait to just invest somewhere. And I tell him, listen, you gotta look every day, you gotta run the numbers, you gotta learn the skill. Real estate is an actual skill. You know, you could just do it a few times, you know, a month or two, and then you'll learn it, and then you don't even have to call me anymore. You could just do it yourself, you know. So whenever he sends me like a property would come up in the market, he sends it to me. What do you think of this? Well, I tell him, what are the numbers? He's like, oh, the rents are going to be this much, and then the mortgage is this much, you know. I tell him, no, you got to start from the beginning. You know, you got to do a spreadsheet. You got to get the exact pity payment, you know, principal, interest, tax, insurance. You got to get used to what people pay out here for lawn care. What do they pay for garbage disposal,
Oh
snow
yeah,
care, you know, all that. So in my case, with my cousin who I'm working with, the pain point is that initial start of doing the work, you know, of learning the skill, you know. But he
yeah,
has all the money in the world, you know. He could probably put like 50% down, you get something out here, but that's where his pain point is. So I tell him, you got to start now, even though you have the money. You can't just buy anything that comes up, you know. You got to learn the skill. You got to start.
yeah. Yeah, I guess the only other way, if he doesn't want to do the work, is some people like that
Mhm.
are,
Potential
they're a
partners.
potential partner who's gonna come and invest. But the problem with being a partner is you don't make as much as the guy doing the work.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And I mean, I could tell him that, and he's also not here. You know, I'm here. He's still in New York City. He's still 4 hours away. So it would make sense for him to partner with me, or I would just manage his properties. But this is where he's at now. So we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you
Yeah,
updated on that.
yeah. And then the other question, that you're probably more familiar with than I am, is because I'm less hands-on than you are. That's very obvious.
For
You
now.
so you don't want to be hands-on, but you'll get there.
Well,
Uh
what I'm doing now, I'm trying to fill my day
yeah.
with as much work as I can, productive work,
Well,
and
you're
then
padding
whatever's
your
left
margin.
over, I'm
It's
just gonna
smart.
delegate. What's that?
You're padding your margin. It's smart. All
Yeah,
these things
yeah.
you're doing add up.
Well,
So,
it's the beginning, you know. It's just 4 units, you know, 2 properties. So you know, you gotta squeeze as much value as I can, and then you know that's gonna pay you off later on. So
yeah.
when it comes to just getting started, that we were talking about, I'm not really that handy. You know, I've done construction for like 6 months as a helper. just general construction. Just give me this tool, give me this sheetrock, go bring
That's
it here.
that's more than both than most people. So
Yeah, yeah, for
yeah.
sure. But I don't know if you're following my progress in my channel, but I'm doing a full gut rehab on this property that where I'm in right now. So upstairs is totally gutted, and down here it's gonna be gutted soon. I didn't know any of this, but I start anyway. How do I start? Well, you can start with YouTube. Just
Yeah.
well, you don't really need to YouTube how to demo. You just like hit things and they just fall off. But
Wait, to preface that, anyone watching this video, try and figure out what's structural, and this is not gutting advice or
yeah, this is not
whatever.
gutting advice. I had to look at what wall is like weight bearing and what is not. But
Yes. Uh, get an engineer or someone's, help figuring out all that smart ways to do things.
yeah, smart ways. But it's also good to just learn yourself a little bit. I think it's more
Yeah,
important
absolutely.
for the long term. So for me, even if my ultimate cash flow is a little bit lower than what it would have been if I didn't got it, it's totally worth it because I learned the whole ins and outs of a gut rehab, and of
Yeah,
course I'm going to do this again. It's definitely going to be more efficient. I learned about roofs and walls and plumbing and electrical and all that. I met like four contractors of each of these fields, like four electricians, four plumbers, and I made all these contacts. I learned all the pricing. I learned what was decent, what was over the top. So these are the things that I was never knew before, and I just
yeah,
jumped in and started with start with a quote here, start with a plan here. I learned how to talk to the city. Went to the city maybe like 10 times, and the guy sat with me 1 hour each time. That's the benefit of a small town. They don't really have that
yeah,
many projects going on. So I was sitting there, and then I had the plan first. I had it like just sketched out with like a pencil. And then he told me, okay, you have to add the dimensions. The toilet has to be this far away from the tub, and you need a smoke detector on each room. You need one smoke detector in the hallway, and it needs to be a carbon dioxide detector too. So I'm learning about all of these things, and
yeah.
I wasn't ready for this when I started the rehab, but
So you're
start.
reminding me of this video. So the whole question that started this video was how do you get started, basically.
Mhm.
And there's this video I saw. It might have been a TED talk years ago, and it was this sound scientist or kind of maybe he was a music guy. But it was a guy who dealt with audio, and he had a baby, and he started recording all the noises the baby made, and he put them on a chart on them trying to say their first word. And
Mhm.
it was the timeline, and it was dots just all over the place on his chart. And slowly over time, the dots start converging into a narrower and narrower, and then suddenly it's a word.
Word.
But there's just hundreds, if not thousands, of data entry points where this kid's just like, I don't know how to say daddy or whatever he's trying to say. And you see all these dots, and I think that's how it starts, because you and I both were in the same situation when we started. We're like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Here's a book. You read a book, and then when you read
Start.
the book, you're like, hey, I've got 90 more questions. I guess I have to read 90 more books.
Mhm. Yeah. Or
you
watch
know
90 videos. Yeah.
or 9 more videos, or
So
and it's
what I've learned, and this is like this could be like the my motto, right?
yeah,
And then when I realized this, it was like, oh, that makes so much sense. That inaction is worse than an action where you fail, right? Where
yeah, absolutely.
where it comes out as a bad result. So you really have to internalize that, right? So inaction is worse than bad action. So it's better to do things wrong than not do them at all. And
I
I think I
Yeah,
try to live by that, and I try to spread it around to my friends as well. But it's
it's
kind of tough.
hard.
Yeah,
It's
it's hard.
hard.
It's
And
hard.
even if you're doing it, or like for me, when we go to start these videos, we sit and we talk, hey, what should the topic be? And we come up with stuff, but it's not, boom, we sit down and 3 minutes later we're up and going, because we've been doing this for 5 years, maybe in five
Well,
years.
as you can tell from the way I've been talking in this video, I'm all over the place. But we're doing it anyway. We're here. You're watching, so Yeah.
Yeah, but we're on task, and we're talking about
Mhm.
we're talking about the process we're currently undergoing.
Yep. Yep. We're talking about things as they happen. So
So, but yeah, I think the most important I think you're right. The most important thing as far as getting started is just getting started, and it's not checking the right box first. It's just checking any box first.
Mhm. Yep. Because that means that you just have
Yeah.
that less boxes to check, right? You have one less that you can fail on. So
Yep. All right. Well, I guess that's the video for today, and the lesson is just get started.
yeah, just start. Remember, inaction is worse than a bad action.
Yep.